I sat down with a group of very talented content creators that are all fairly well-known, knowledgeable in the Wuthering Waves community. I asked them two very simple questions. One, did Wuthering Waves meet your expectations? And two, what would you rate Wuthering Waves on a scale from 1 to 10? Here's what a few of them had to say.
I would say yes overall.
I believe Wuthering Waves did live up to my expectations for the most part.
Wuthering Waves certainly lived up to my expectations and exceeded them, actually.
Well, it definitely met my expectations from a combat perspective. I think some of the other world building elements aren't quite there, and so I'm still optimistic for the future, but it definitely didn't quite meet it.
It's actually more than lived up to my expectations.
For me personally, Wuthering Waves 100% unequivocally shattered my expectations. I played multiple beta tests for it, and I think across the board, this was a significant improvement. Sure, there are some people that prefer the old graphical style, they prefer the old story, some of them even prefer the old character models, but me, no, I like how everything is now. I am not going to argue that there are certain aspects of the game that they definitely miss a mark with. The story from chapters or act 1 through 4, the voice acting for pretty much all of the female characters with the exception of Sanhua, but everything else, the incredible action combat, the beautiful world, the actual gameplay, running up walls, running up mountains, grappling. There have been so many people that told me, Stix, I just can't go back to Genshin Impact now because the gameplay is just so slow. It's so cluttered feeling, it's so boring, and I can completely understand. Wuthering Waves is a significant upgrade over every action game available at present. Its story got progressively better after chapter 4, after Scar was introduced, after Alto and Encore were introduced, after Gion started becoming a main focus. The companions look progressively better. Like, have you seen Jinza and Chongli? Dude, they look like they're from a different game. It feels as though the budget for those two characters was increased significantly. Outside of the game, the revenue that they've accumulated, the compensation that we've gotten for the issues that we've had, the content cadence, the frequency with which we're actually moving through, everything successfully met and that exceeded my expectations. But let's go ahead and see what everyone else had to say.
I would say yes overall. Okay, so I hate saying that I expected the game modes to be in there, like tower adversity. That's so elusive. So those things, like, I kind of would assume that it should be in the game just for endgame content. Other things that kind of surprised me though were the hologram fights. They were actually pretty fun to do. So I did like just all the content they included in the game so far at launch. It just feels like a lot of the game modes itself were a little bit underdeveloped. And I don't mean to say that in like a bad way. I think they just need time to kind of like give us more levels. So it's kind of telling to me that I don't want to say the whales, but they are the whales. Okay, but the whales in the game, they're already done the endgame content as of week 1. Right, so there's kind of like, if they're done in week 1, like, is that really a good kind of trajectory for the game and the state, how long it will last? So I kind of look at them. It's really bad though. I don't want to look at them because they're like the minority of the player base. But to me, like, when I see someone finishing the content within like a week and a half and getting like perfect echoes, not gonna name certain people, Fob, but people with like really good echoes at like the end of like a week and a half, and they're finishing all the endgame content. I'm kind of thinking like, okay, well, me right now, because I mean, I'm a free to play, right? So I won't touch that for a very long time, but it kind of makes me wonder like how much of the player base will stick around for the game and just continue to wait for the updates. So far right now, I guess this ties into like this current game state. But like right now though, I do think like so far it has lived up to my expectations. I do wish that they did kind of fix the bugs more before they released it. I feel like we were kind of in beta when we were playing it because, I don't know, to me, like, language issues should be not even existent in the game. Like those are just language pack files. Those are translation things that shouldn't have even been in there. That should have just been done and, you know, like perfectly done by, and I'm not going to blame the voice actors too. Like we're not going to talk about the direction or whoever directed the voice acting. I'm not talking about that. I'm just plainly talking about the fact that if I stuck it on autoplay, it just cuts out every single so often. I'm just like, what did they say? So it kind of just ruined it for the English though. I'm not so sure about like the Chinese or the Japanese or the, you know, other languages. Not sure about those, but as for just the English, it just kind of felt like lack of like care in that, at least their voice acting. But like other than like just little things like that, I do have high hopes for the game. I feel like it will, I mean, they just released the patch notes today. So I feel like they will be able to clean all these things up. And they do seem to be listening to community a lot. They already like upgraded the echoes issues. Like they touched on that already, which was something that a lot of us had, well, not a lot of us, but most of us, I won't say a lot of us, but most of us had issues with. We were very vocal about it. So just seeing that they're able to like listen to it and get that done within the first patch, it's, you know, gives me hope that the game will be better.
Wuthering Waves certainly lived up to my expectations and exceeded them, actually. I've been looking at Wuthering Waves for a while. I was watching a bunch of leaks, people who streamed it after it was, you know, people could stream it. And I was like, oh my God, this looks good. I really want to play it. It's like a Genshin, but, you know, the combat looks a little bit faster at that time when I initially seen it. And I couldn't wait to get it. Once it released, it exceeded every expectation and then some. Obviously I'm a person who didn't play played the closed beta, and so when I finally got my hands on it, I thought it was great, dude. The combat, and then running into the difficulty of the hologram. There's difficulties in the game that really satisfy me, a player who likes to, I don't know, I like a challenge. So I don't know. I was blown. I didn't know anything about the holograms, the fights. I didn't know about the Tower of Adversity. I didn't know how difficult the game could become. And I like that if I want to casually play through the game or pick it up and be more hardcore, that it does have that option for me as a gamer.
Wuthering Waves met most of my expectations, but definitely not all of them. I think one thing that goes without saying is that Wuthering Waves combat is in a great state. I think the dynamics and the depth of each character, having different abilities that they can combo with, and there's new nuances that the community is still finding in terms of animation canceling and incorporating echoes in that way. I think it's really in a solid state from a combat perspective, and I think the difficulty scaling is there that's satisfying for a lot of the hardcore player base. But I think in some of the other areas, it definitely still needs a little bit of work. I think knowing the narrative potential that Kuro Games has brought with PGR in the past, even though presented differently, I was expecting a little bit more from the story. Well, yes, there's a turning point around chapter or act 4, and then again, really reaching a good culmination around act 6. I do still think it needs more to it, and they need to continue to build on that. I think people wanting to be drawn into the world is a necessary thing. I think people are wanting to explore the Wuthering Waves world and lore even more, but I don't know if we've been given enough of that yet in a way that has been satisfying for players. And so I kind of wish they had done a little bit more on that side of it. As well, I do still think while the ecosystem has improved and it has some positive aspects in terms of the ability to unlimited farm for the echoes that you want, I do still think there are some issues with raising the echoes, and that system still needs to be improved a little bit in terms of the resource economy. So while it definitely met my expectations from a combat perspective, I think some of the other world building elements aren't quite there, and so I'm still optimistic for the future, but it definitely didn't quite meet it.
I believe Wuthering Waves did live up to my expectations for the most part, at least for the like majority of the game itself. I mean, there's little bugs and little things here and there. Like sometimes I still get lagging, and it is starting to feel a little grindy. The Echo RNG is really bad sometimes, but this is 1.0, and they have plenty of time to fix everything and give us what everyone's been asking for, like the wave plates being the cost being way too high and all of the other things, of course. But overall, I think it has lived up to expectations as far as like the world building, the characters, like the designs and the combat. All of the characters, kits, and their mechanics feel pretty fleshed out and like smooth for the most part. The combat's really smooth. All of the like world things, the exploration and everything like that is really nice. I get on off stream and I play. I just explore and I'll go and I'll get all the little squares, the sonorospheres, and all the things that I need to collect off stream. So I still play a lot of time off stream and do a lot of just goofing around in there, and I think it's fun personally. So
It actually more than lived up to my expectations. I kept telling like my community beforehand that I was like, of all the gacha games coming out, like there's Unending Dawn, Zenless Zone Zero, Wuwa, and Azure Promelia. It was actually like the third least excited. It was like Zenless Zone's my least excited, then Wuwa, then was Unending Dawn, and then Azure Promelia was the one I was the most excited for. And it's honestly like killed some of my hype for Azure Promelia and Unending Dawn because of how much I like it. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely lived up to expectations and then some, for sure. I don't think I like had too many expectations going into it, if I'm being honest. This is gonna sound a lot like what people said for Genshin like 4 years ago, but it's the bones of a really good game, and now it just needs to be fleshed out. But I think the difference between that and Genshin is like they never intended to do that with Genshin, while the devs have like actively listened to people and like want to flesh out and like give it that like meat to the bone. So I think eventually it'll become like a super duper good game. But as of right now, I think it's like the combat's really satisfying. The exploration is really satisfying, but it does feel like there's a bit of a lack of stuff to do besides the echo farming, which like the echo farming, being able to farm it like indefinitely and kind of almost makes it worse in a way, because it's like, you know, that you shouldn't roll on anything that's not like perfect stats, because you could just keep farming. And then it gets you to the point of like, well, now I just kind of don't want to farm it anymore. And like, I'll just wait until I get lucky.
I agree. That was well said. You actually took it in a different direction to everyone else, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
So what I was expecting from Wuthering Waves was, of course, the main two things that were the draw points of Wuthering Waves were the combat and also the music. And when it comes to that, I've got like a kind of 50-50. In terms of the combat, I'm really very pleased with it, and in terms of the music, I've got a few pointers. Like on the whole, I think Wuthering Waves has lived up to my expectations. Though I'd be lying if I said there weren't things I was disappointed by, except with the music. Like I had a bit of a rocky start with the significant stuttering and lag issues on launch, so I bought an extra 32 gigabytes of RAM on top of my initial 16 gigabytes. Don't tell my wife. And since then, I haven't had the problem anymore, but the point remains that I feel this game needs a lot of work in terms of optimization, which is why I see it's going consistently going down on the Android marketplace, which I'm kind of worried by, but focusing mainly on the game itself. I feel that the characters are actually real and they're actually talking to one another and not just giving voice lines, although in saying that, I've been playing this game in JP, and I've heard that the English VAs are a little subpar, to put it mildly. Like, going back to the combat, the combat is fluid and incredibly fun to play, and the boss monsters always seem to be at a good, challenging level for me, just the right balance to keep it interesting. But if I'm going to nitpick it, I feel like I said, the music and the sound design isn't as good as I remember it being in CPT2. Like they overcompensated to the criticism about the combat hit effects, because they had that criticism from CPT2, and by doing so, I feel like they've nerfed the music in a lot of aspects to make, particularly with the volume as well, to make those hit effects sound more punchy. Like they've increased the hit effects sound itself, but in doing so, they've also lowered the volume to make that discrepancy larger, to make the effects stand out more. And I really don't like that, especially because they nerfed my favorite track from CPT2, which was the Impertinence Herons boss theme, and it's now on the Ix, or however you pronounce it, the AIX monster, and it doesn't hit the same. They've removed a lot of the techno highs, and I just don't know why. So yeah, I feel like they really need to focus on the sound a little bit more, particularly to do with the music. I've heard that they're going to bring Vanguard back in for sound design. I wish they would get more into the sound music creation part of it as well. We'll just have to see how that goes. And also, yeah, we had the problem in Japan specifically with the translation and other localization issues, particularly to do with the Jian's weapon, that whole fiasco. But on the whole, I think I'm really quite happy with Wuthering Waves. Like it's had its problems, and it would be foolish to say this game is dead on just initial release. But it all depends on how Kuro responds to the player feedback. I mean, we can't really judge it just on the 1.0 release. It depends on how this game grows. But on initial 1.0 launch, there are some things I'm happy about, some things I'm not too pleased about.
I think Wuthering Waves, as of right now, is decently playable. Like, I know a lot of people have other things in their lives they have to do, and they're not like me playing 2 accounts right now. But if you're only playing 1 account, it doesn't take a whole bunch of your time keeping up with dailies and then logging in. And then if you have extra time, you have other things to do. I think the events they have right now, I haven't done a lot of the events so far. I've done like some of them, but the events right now aren't that bad, and they actually like grab attention and help you like learn things about the game. I think it's actually really one of the things I feel hasn't really been talked about is how the tutorials aren't too bad. I think for a lot of games, at least in my opinion, learning how characters work is absolutely horrific, and reading is even more horrific because I'm a VTuber and I can't read. So the tutorials they have set in place really aren't that bad for like the characters. It may not like be super in depth, but it's enough for you to actually just enjoy the game, which is like kind of the point of playing a game, enjoying it. So yeah, I would say as of right now, it's a good game. Like, it's playable, it's not too broken, there's still being fixes made in general, and the company is really active in doing that. So an active company that actually listens to their community is like a good place to be.
Yeah, I think Wuthering Waves is a good game overall. Obviously, I don't have much experience with well, I do have a little bit of experience with gacha games and stuff like that. I've played all the horror games, stuff like that in the past. But to be honest, that was like my first kind of introduction to it. I maybe have played like one before that, but I honestly can't remember. And compared to games like that, it's definitely been a much more enjoyable experience. And yeah, I think I've just enjoyed it way more than I did with those games. And yeah, it's just an overall fun game so far. Obviously, it's only been a month though, so you know we don't really know how it's going to go in the future. But so far, in the early stage, it seems really, really good. Overall, I think that like the character design is super nice. That's one of the things that really drew me in, was the overall character design and the design of the world. Super detailed, super nice, and like all the characters are unique and have their own kind of personality, which I really like. And that's especially something that I like with a lot of gacha games that I play, is the characters. Like the gameplay doesn't matter too much to me. I mean, you know, I play a lot of gacha games now that don't have you know, very good gameplay, if you know, if that kind of makes sense. But I think Wuthering Waves has the good mix of good gameplay and also good character design that I could just enjoy overall. And yeah, I think that's one of the strong points that they have. And yeah, the combat and the like exploration is super nice. And I think what made it like really like important to me was that it wasn't too different from like horror games such as like Genshin, stuff like that. It was familiar, but it was also different at the same time, to like kind of make it new and enjoyable and fresh for a lot of other people to play as well. But at the same time, it wasn't too different, and you know, you kind of felt at home playing the game.
Yeah, so I would say the game generally overall lived up to my personal expectations. I have been probably one of the biggest proponents of that Kuro could do things a lot better in a lot of different areas. Overall, personally, I give the game a 7.5 out of 10, which I know is a lot lower than like the general consensus of people that generally give it. But I feel that there is a lot of shortcomings with the game and a lot of things that need to be fixed, which it's obvious Kuro is working on, but there's just a ton of things in the base game at 1.0 that just aren't living up to my expectations, and I have a feeling a lot of people feel this way as well, but they're not being as critical about it. So, for example, one of the biggest thing is like the optimization for mobile and PC, mobile specifically. I personally haven't had any issues, but I know so many people that went into the game thinking that the game would run well on their devices, because Kuro obviously came out and said the game will run, you need these minimum specs or these minimum phones to run the game, right? So they had a whole thing about this before the game came out. And it turns out that a lot of these devices, a lot of these phones that they said would be able to run the game, suddenly, they can run the game, but it's in a borderline unplayable state. So that was one of the things that I feel they really lost a lot of community goodwill with their minimum specifications for, before the game came out. Which is a shame, because this, obviously the release of your game in the first few days are so incredibly important to making sure that you're getting as many players as possible to stick with your game. And a lot of people, couldn't even play the game when it first came out. So that was like one of the big issues there that I saw. Again, I haven't had any issues. I got a very beefy PC though. Not everyone does, but a lot of people don't realize as well is that this game is running on the Unreal Engine. They compare it to Genshin a lot, which Genshin originally was running on with like Unity engine, which anyone familiar with any sort of game development, Unreal Engine is a lot harder of an engine to actually work with and optimize, and also has a ton of bugs. So people like to do the one-to-one comparison when, yes, it's the same type of game, but we're dealing with two completely different engines. But yeah, the mobile optimization was one of the biggest issues. Getting onto the localization, especially specifically for English, a lot of things just straight up don't make sense with how they translated things. A lot of the skill descriptions and like the forte descriptions are almost borderline unreadable with how lengthy and wordy they are. You almost need a freaking math degree or a freaking PhD to read some of these descriptions and be able to decipher them, to actually figure out what exactly they do. That's one of the big issues with me personally, is that like you shouldn't need to take a minute or two to figure out what your forte circuit does, right? It should just be easily digestible. It should be right to the point. You shouldn't have to sit there and bust out the calculator to figure out exactly what they do.
I would say it kind of broke through and did even go further beyond, especially when it comes to the graphics, how the game feels like. At first I was like, maybe it could be a little too bland. I mean, like in Genshin you have the elemental reactions. That was something that I really liked in Genshin. For me personally, mashing elements, stuff like that. If you get two guys that are fire, you get a certain bonus, etc. So like there's always this little, how can I put it, a little reward to you actually gathering characters depending on the color, or more so say the element they're rocking. So I always like the collectability that the elements offer in Genshin, and more so also the synergy they offer. For Wuthering Waves, we didn't have that. I was kind of concerned, because that was a big point of what made me fall in love with Genshin. But it definitely, it didn't need to at all. Like Xian is one of the best characters I've ever played, ever. He chose me too. We got the weapon, we got the C1, all that. That was crazy. I really like the compensation system they've been doing. Like even as a company, you can already feel like we're in damn good hands. I've heard nothing but good things about PGR. They do say Kuro Games is the combat. Kuro Games' forte is definitely the combat. So yeah, I do feel like it shattered my expectations when it comes to how the combat is implemented. It didn't need nothing too fancy. Parrying and dodging are very key, and key enough to the point where you really need focus. And you know that meme, like you gotta lock in against the opponent. So I've noticed like I'm still like a little unga boonga since because of the Genshin days. And I'm not doing myself any favors because of Xian, but no, because of the parry, because of just how powerful the enemies are, you understanding them. I know a lot of players are already like, sweaty players are already just shitting on the game. They're just destroying every content. I've seen some people on stream come to me and say, oh, it's unacceptable. Like, how is the game already being beaten so badly already? Like, this is like Genshin 2.0. I'm like, bro, we just started. If you think there won't be more hardcore content, you're insane. And the game does definitely give me that vibe. Collecting characters, staying up to speed with the meta, I feel like it's gonna be key.
Concerning my rating, I would honestly, I know almost every other person gave it roughly about a 7 to 7.5. I would give it For a gacha game, an 8.5. It could increase based off of how 1.1, 2, 3, and 4 go. I think if the story improves, I think if the vocal direction and the English dub improves, and we attain additional ways of leveling our echoes, or at the very least grinding and obtaining the XP items we need to boost the levels of our echoes, that could increase to a 9 or more. But I think Wuthering Waves is by far one of the best gacha games out there right now in almost every aspect. Not the story, not the voice acting. Nikke has that beat. I think Genshin, or Honkai Star Rail at the very least, definitely has that beat. Genshin probably also has a beat, but 1.0 Genshin was also, without the, the benefit of nostalgia goggles, not very good. Honkai Star Rail 1.0 was definitely a treat, but people seem to forget Genshin was not. Let's see what everyone else, though, has to say about the rating.
I would rate Wuthering Waves a solid 7.5 to 8 out of 10.
I would put it at a 7.5 because I would say the game itself, for the majority of that score, the lore still needs work. It's too much just presented to you. It's very much like told to you rather than shown to you, and it is just more focused on the world rather than the rover herself. And it just feels like there's not really any mystery. We kind of already know a bunch of things, and they just kind of just tell things to you rather than show you things. So I feel like they just need to flesh out the lore a little bit better. And yeah, but other than that, I think it's a pretty good game.
I'll lead you a little bit to help because I needed that. I'm more neutered to like things like this, so.
Nothing wrong with that. Okay, now, if I were to have you rate Wuthering Waves on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate it?
Okay. I would say, as somebody who's newer to gachas, and the only gachas I've really played are Honkai Star Rail and a little bit of Genshin, I would probably give it say a 7, because it isn't quite there yet, but it's enough for me to play it and enjoy it.
If I'm being really critical and nitpicky here, I actually would place it at about a 6.5, and that's being hard carried by the world exploration and the combat. The other systems, they still need a bit of work. But I do love the game.
I would rate Wuthering Waves. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't crucify me. But I would rate Wuthering Waves an 8 out of 10. I think I'm a very harsh critic. And the only reason that the game is stopping it from being a 10 is because it did release with a couple of bugs, with a couple of things that made the game a little bit unplayable. The audio, the music was not even there at the beginning. They later patched it. And just because of those bugs and stuff, I have to be fair, and I can't give it a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10. 8 out of 10 is as good as it's going to get for me. And I think that shouldn't, that doesn't mean that the game is bad. It just means that for a full release game out of early access or closed beta or open beta, I want a game to have the least amount of bugs as possible. And unfortunately, it released a little bit clunky, a little bit buggy, a little bit of issues here and there, which, by the way, I give 100% credit where it is due. The company has definitely picked up the slack. I don't think the Kuro Games has taken a break since they launched the game, because they have been putting out patches left, right, and center to fix it. And to me, that speaks volumes for a game and a game company that I'm going to be playing for years from now. I really like that.
Overall, personally, I give the game a 7.5 out of 10.
This is such a safe answer. Like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10, because the stuff that is there is really good. The combat feels amazing. Fighting Mephis feels so good. Especially difficulty 4 and up, you have the clone, and then you parry the clone, and then a second later you parry the main body. It feels so cool when you pull stuff like that off. But I think my biggest issue right now is the only repeatable endgame is Tower of Adversity, and that's basically just Spiral Abyss. And then it's yeah, you have the Suzumi game mode, but it's that's a one and done. and then it doesn't refresh, and then like the holograms, like that's my favorite endgame content. But you do it one time and then like you're done. Like you clear 6 and then there's no reason to do it again besides you just like it.
I would probably rate Wuthering Waves, I would say an 8, maybe like close to a 9, 8.5-ish, because honestly, I think it's a really, really good game. It's not perfect, but at the same time, it's definitely hit the spot more than any other gacha game has, like, in the past couple of years.
It's hard for me because if I were to rate like a game to be a 10, I wouldn't say any game to me would be like a solid 10, you know, like maybe a 9.5, because I don't think every game is perfect for gacha games especially. But if I were to say like Honkai Star Rail is a 10, like a 9.5, I'm gonna say it's a 9.5 because to me, I feel like that game is so good for a gacha game. It has like everything in it. They update very like frequently, and they also listen to the community, which is crazy. You know, it's crazy to see the differences. You can get this up. But like if that was a 9.5, I would say Wuthering Waves as of right now, just because it's like the first like patch to the first update, I'd say it'd be like at least like a 7.5. I think 7.5. I will give it that. The only problem I had with it, like I said, it was just like the little the things in the beginning just shouldn't have been there. But if I were to say like right now, there's still things they have to fix.
As it is right now, I would rate it an 8. I would easily give it a 9.5 or a 10 if it weren't for the obvious issues we started with. I mean, thankfully because of those issues, we got all the free pools. We got a free 5-star. Hey, you know what? Keep them coming. If you ask me personally. But in a global way of looking at the game, and for the majority, I guess we can give it an easy solid 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10. The game is great. The devs, like I said, just knowing that I'm in good hands already puts me at a big, big ease.